Let's do this.
All right, we're live.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear us, Twitch? Tell us
What's
now.
up, Twitch?
I think we are good to go.
Outstanding. Cool. Well, welcome again, Adam, the Space Juggler. Dr. Adam Dipert, the Space Juggler. We're so happy to have you here today. I was just explaining to people in our Discord community, saying hi to Twitch and YouTube and all the people watching us today. Adam is one of the most interesting people that I know. He has got a PhD in what kind of physics is it?
I do experimental nuclear physics. So I study
experimental nuclear physics. Not even nuclear physics, y'all. We're getting into experimental nuclear physics. But that doesn't stop there. Generally, when I see Adam, there's a 50% chance that he is either on stilts or has something on fire that he's juggling around his body. And then to top it all off, he is a aspiring space dancer and current space juggler. And then to top all that off, he recently went off and did a 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat, which is something I think, one, is on my bucket. It's definitely something that I want to do for myself. And I feel like he's taken a really empowering message from that I wanted to share with the Amara community. But before digging into the meat of that, I just wanted to get you to know this very fascinating individual. So Dr. Dipert, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I just was really honored when you asked about that experience and wanted to talk about it a little bit more. And it's really nice to meet you, Sam.
Nice to meet you as well. I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
So before digging into the Vipassana stuff, I just gotta wonder, what came first? Was it the space? Was it the juggling? Where in the timeline of Adam did all of this stuff kind of come together? I know you said your mission is to dance in space. When was that moment when that began to crystallize for you?
So I guess actually I dig a little bit deeper than that question and say that actually circus came first.
Okay.
Before the science. After high school, I ran off and joined the circus, as one can do. You might not think it's possible, but you can actually run away to join the circus. And so I did that. And then when I was 23 was when I started college, and my understanding of mathematics is very much rooted in my body. So it was when I got into multivariable calculus, and we were talking about things moving through 3 dimensions and stuff rolling on other stuff without slipping, that I was like, oh, wow, the circus stuff that I spend all my time doing is the same thing that we're talking about in math class. It's just so much more boring in math class. So how is it that I can, link what I'm observing and bring my body into my study of mathematics and physics? And so that went on for about 10 years. And then I'm like any other, circus performer, physicist, and I dream about circus and space. And I had a friend that somebody was like, hey, we should buy her a 0G flight for her 40th birthday. And I was like, yeah, totally. So we all threw in some money. And then I was just like, I'm gonna do this the most awesome way. So I took her to the flight, and then I didn't go on it, but I saw it. And when I saw it, I was just like, man, this is possible. The only thing holding us back is us. We can make progress on this now. And so I started saving my money right then. And a year later, I went on my first parabolic flight. And in the process of preparing for that flight, I wondered, what would I need to understand in order to be a competent mover in weightlessness? And through that process of curiosity about what I needed to understand, I studied a lot of math. I wrote some computer programs to simulate the human body. I read a bunch of articles on people's experiences. And it started to become really clear how much the way that we speak is rooted in gravity, how much the way that we move, obviously, is rooted in gravity, and that the cognitive structures that arise out of being an embodied person in a gravitational field influences the types of things that we can think about. And so it over the last 8 years, so it's been 8 years that I've been on this mission, it's really gone all the way from being in the body to being in the mind to being in community and in communication, and then just wondering what is it going to be like when people are actually raised in altered gravitational environments, and what can we learn now in order to prepare us for that, because we have such a terrible track record at accepting anything that's different. And so that's really where the core of my work is, in my heart, is being like, okay, I can start with the body and everything else naturally arises from it. So I can just go do movements and then just reflect upon what's necessary in order to make that comprehensible.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that introduction. So, like, what are some examples of some of this, I guess, gravity-centric thinking or gravity-centric language that we use that you think could be sort of liberated by exploring some of this zero-G embodiment stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that it would be good if more people could experience weightlessness and experience, space itself and the overview effect, which is the idea that, seeing the planet floating in space helps you to appreciate how much of a garden and a marble and a, beautiful environment that we have here, and that most of space is not hospitable to us. And so it's really, important for us to keep in mind that our planet matters a lot, and global warming is real. And we need to respect that our environment is not infinite in size. And so one thing that comes through my study of embodied cognition, and do you know embodied cognition well enough to give the description, or should I just keep talking?
Well, why don't you please just describe it for the people watching?
Yeah, for our audience, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So embodied cognition is a branch of cognitive science, and the main thesis of it is that the type of body that you have has a direct influence on the types of things that you think about and that you're capable of thinking about. So you're beyond the brain body has a constitutive role in the brain's development. And an example of this is that in English, we associate more and up. So if you have more of something, you can also say that the amount of it has gone up, or if you have less of something, the amount of it has gone down. And there's no fundamental relationship between more and upness other than in a gravitational field. The classic example for how that is an embodied experience for us is that if you think about like a cup, when you fill it up, the amount inside of the cup goes up, right? So like literally more of the liquid in the cup means that the height has gone up. But then we extend that into other things by saying like prices are raising, right? And there's no fundamental relationship between price and height, or numbers and height for that matter. That extends further into other things like our emotional health, like happiness is up as well. I'm feeling up today. I'm feeling down today. I need to get up. And so in those ways, gravity really has a deep influence on how we make extensions into our subjective realities. And kind of the like sequence, it's, I gave a quick overview, but the sequence is that you develop a concept for something. A concept could be something like a container. A container has an inside and an outside and a boundary in between them. And then when we extend that into some subjective domain, like your family, that has an inside, people who are inside of it, people who are outside of it, and then a boundary between them, that process turns a concept into a metaphor. And our language is highly dependent on metaphor. And we use it all the time, even when we're not even thinking about it. And even in that example, prices are raising is a metaphor. And it's so embedded in our language and in our culture that we don't even recognize that that's a metaphor. And so, so I think it's really worth it to take the time to back up and be like, wait, what are the things that are influencing us that are just gravitationally oriented? And then we can start to choose, like, are those useful constructs or not? And really, the conversation is either not happening or it's so philosophical that it doesn't really matter to most people, And so I'm just trying to share this observation so that maybe when other people are kind of like going through their daily life and thinking about the ways that they're conceptualizing things and sharing ideas, is it like, are you using gravity in order to orient your idea? And is that something you want? I think the most dangerous one is hierarchies, right? Control is up. So the people on top are doing something. You're always wanting to climb the corporate ladder. If you're the person on the bottom, that's a bad thing. And this is like a really dangerous, really dangerous structure that we should be analyzing. And
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring up this concept of metaphors, because in psychology we've done that for the longest time. So, for instance, one metaphor we used to use back in the days of Freud was the idea that if you bottled up your emotions, then you would explode. Right? That was something that we would say. Well, what was the dominant source of power at that time? It was the steam engine. And with the steam engine, if you didn't provide a release valve, if you allowed all the pressure to build up, it would explode. And it's a metaphor that we saw all around us, and we applied it to human psychology. And there's actually not a lot of evidence to suggest that that's true. There are these therapies where people scream and shout and punch pillows, or they say if you play a violent video game, then that's cathartic. Turns out it's not true at all. Turns out it activates all the anger centers in your brain. But that's the metaphor that we were working with. Fast forward a little bit further into when we got into the cognitive psychology days, we started thinking about everything with the metaphor of the computer. So we're talking about, short-term or working memory is similar to RAM. It's like we're using now the technological metaphors of today on our psychology. And it's really interesting now that we're moving into the world of quantum computing and stuff like that, the impact that has on the metaphor that we're now turning on our psychology. So really fascinating stuff. And it really plugs into the mindfulness, which we can kind of pivot the conversation in the direction of your retreat soon, because...
Can I put one more thing in there before we deviate too far? Because you just bring up such a good point, and it's something that I think is super important in relationship to science, because I also really deeply think everybody should be super into science, is that, in our daily lives, the source of information that we have for sensing is from our, the 5 senses plus the 1,000 other senses, that are inside of our bodies. Vestibular sense, of course, is my favorite that people are always leaving out of the list of senses. And scientific apparatuses facilitate the capacity for extending the range of senses that we have and the types of sensing that we can do, right? So like your examples of steam engines and quantum computers, and then quantum computing, all of these are scientific apparatuses that extend both the conceptual structures that we can use, as well as the types of things that we can use to sense them. And so it's really, I think, really useful to remember that, like, another that you can use technology to extend your sense experience, and that's important, and it's meaningful, and your brain can use it in practically the same way that your other senses are integrated into your mental structures. And so yeah, it was so related to what you were saying. I just wanted to throw in there.
Absolutely. And so, before actually diving into what I want to get into, what we'll get to, is the idea of mindfulness and sort of challenging scripts and challenging the background processing, challenging the metaphors that we have, or we run on autopilot. Whereas in the case that you're describing, we're thinking about things in sort of all these gravity-centric hierarchical structures, or whether or not we're applying this computing model. And it's not that models are ever wrong. It's just that sometimes models can be misapplied. And if we're not mindful about when we're applying a model and when we're not, that's when we're just blindly following that autopilot. And that's what mindfulness is all about. It's about, stepping out of those and only applying and adopting and moving forward with models when they actually serve the purpose and intention. But before we dive into that, because I'm sure the Vipassana retreat must have been incredible for helping hone what background processes are going on when you're sitting in a room for 10 hours at a time for 10 days. What does it mean to you to live an embodied life? You've used the word embodied a lot. I've always thought of you as an embodied person with everything that you do between circus and dance and flow. But what does that mean to you, just like to live an embodied life?
So all of us at this point have them,
At this point.
Yes. And I'd encourage us not to be too discriminatory against anyone who doesn't have one. A corporal reality is hopefully going to be a part of our lives at some point. So The body is the channel through which information flows from the world into our brains. We value the brain. Many people value the brain quite deeply. And it is easy to get so stuck in mental structures that you forget that you have a body and forget to like tune into the sensory apparatuses that you have. And so when I'm say embodiment, I'm thinking about like really using the information from my body on a similar level to the value I find of the information that is processed in my mind, because the body is super intelligent and there is definitely processing that happens outside of the brain before information arrives at your brain. Like in your senses, there is processing prior to it reaching your brain. And so your cognitive structures are definitely more expansive than just the brain. And so that first layer of admitting and accepting and moving into paying attention with the body, I think does align a lot with mindfulness and Vipassana practice, in the sense that it forces you to be in the present moment. Because it's like only in your brain is where you would find yourself being stuck in the past or worrying about the future, right? And so it brings you into that. It brings you into the presence. Most of the time, our present moment is not suffering. So that's, it's not always true, but most of the time, you're not in a state of pain. For people who don't have chronic pain. So that's maybe not a fair thing to say if yeah. Anyways.
Even for people with chronic pain, I mean, so I got into meditation because I struggled so much with depression. And when I was in my depressed mind before I had done my first meditative experience of any kind, the negative chatter in my mind was so pervasive that the first time I did a meditation and felt the space between my thoughts, it was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how loud it's been in here this whole time. I never even noticed it because I lived up there all the time. And especially with depression, because it is a very cognitive, disorder is a strong word, but cognitive set of habits. We fall into a lot of black and white thinking where we use a lot of words of like, I always feel this way, or I never am this way. And one of the biggest things that mindfulness has done for me is that if I am feeling particularly dark about something and I begin to observe the never language or always language, the absolutist language, doing stuff where I get into the body or get into the breath challenges that, because it actually says, wait, are you actually right now feeling that way? Oh, you're not. Well, that challenges the narrative that it's always such a way or never such a way. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's what we do with the meditative practices we practice here, is usually when we practice mindfulness, we're anchoring in through the body or through the breath, because as you just said, you're in the present moment when you're in the body and you're in the breath. Like, it's kind of impossible to be anywhere else. And so that helps to pull us out of whether it's the anxious brain or the depressed brain or whatever. So yes, the body is, as we say in the meditation all the time, the body is always sending us information, and it's usually pretty good information to listen to. But we've only got so many resources to devote to it. So if we're always living up in our head, if we're not living an embodied life, we're missing out on a lot of life. And so it's really a wonderful practice to check in with the interface between you and the world, which is the body.
Yeah, and it's really fun in the sense that, like, I found that as I continue to tune more into my body, then it helps me to question more what's beyond my body, and that can be objects, that can be other people, that can be, the room that I'm in or whatever. And so, it really helps to stimulate curiosity about the world, because I really deeply believe that maintaining a good level of curiosity is an excellent healthcare practice.
Curiosity is the ultimate antidote to depression. I think depression gets you into that state of boredom, of that I've seen it all before. And if you take a moment to just drop into a single breath, that that's not true. Like, that you can explore and observe so much happening just within a single moment, just within a single breath. And if you really bring that that beginner's mind, that curious awareness to it, it absolutely challenges a lot of the tricks that the depression brain could try to pull on you. So curiosity, beginner's mind, mindfulness, all setting us up for the experience that you had recently. What attracted you to the Vipassana retreat? I want to learn a bit about what attracted you to it, and then kind of give us a day in the life, and then transition more towards the realizations and what you took from it. But beginning with, what made you decide 10-day Vipassana retreat? What put that in your mind?
Yeah, I've had some friends who go to Vipassana retreats and have been profoundly moved by them. And they're really good friends, and I trust them. And they have told me I would be very into this and I should give it a try. Also, it is very intense and it doesn't, it's not perfect for everybody. And I have also heard of some people being suggested or receiving the suggestion, going and then not talking to that friend again for a month because they were like, what did you tell me to do? So in that way it was just like I had a positive perspective of it, and I am kind of an all-in type of person that once I get going,
You?
I'm like, I am totally able to jump all the way in. And so in that way it was already appealing. And then I hit a really tough year, a really hard life experience, a lot of emotions and a lot of challenges. And it came back on my plate, and a friend offered to take me with her. And I was just like, okay, you know what? Yeah, now's the time. Like, if pain isn't the stimulus for when you need change, then I don't know what is. So I was just like, okay, let's do this. And yeah, that was kind of it, is having positive uh, uh, positive information about it for a number of years, and then something that really pushed me over to get me to do it. And that's such the hard thing, is committing to something drastic when you're not in a drastic situation. Right?
And
Like,
so
if you're just
so you talked about diving all in, and you're definitely the type of person who dives all in. Did you have any established meditation practice before? Did you have any prior experience with it, or did you just dive right in the deep end of the pool?
yeah, so I see kind of my history with meditation. So for 3 years when I was a young person, so I started reading Thich Nhat Hanh um, the summer before my father died when I was 15. And so through that transition, his texts were very much a part of my processing. And then um, I started going to a Dharma center in Kettering, Ohio, and I went there for a number of years. And we had like the Green Tara as the patron, and did a lot of Tibetan chanting and stuff like that. And there's a monastery in India that monks would come to visit the center from, and the center owned a house out in the country that the monks would stay at. And so I got to be around monks, and kind of realized just like the humanity of monkness. It's like they're just people. And I guess this was something I was thinking about. What would be an important message? You don't meditate because you're good at something. You meditate because you realize you need a tune-up, because you need something to keep yourself on track. I don't meditate now because I'm perfect. I meditate now because I'm flawed. And getting to hang out with monks, you realize that it's the same thing with them. Even when they've dedicated their whole life to doing this thing, it's because they realize how flawed they are, and they're ready to really take some action about it. And so I did that for some years. When I started traveling in my first couple of years as a circus performer, the only book I brought with me was the Bhagavad Gita, and I read that every day for 3 years. And it's not like deeply, it's not like every chapter is all about meditation or something, but it does talk about meditation, and it does help kind of like keep that alive, or awareness of that alive, because that's such a regular practice in Indian culture and in the text. And I've done yoga and done meditating for a number of years in that, and
And
other
of course, I know
mostly I have
the
meditation.
the flow that you do as well, I'm sure, has a meditative component to you as well. As we all know, not all meditation happens on the mat.
Yeah, so there's an interesting book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. called Flow. And if you haven't read it and you're wanting to kind of get like a deep dive into optimized life experience, then it's a really excellent text. And I think he's a very human psychologist. It's not overly technical. And he just interviewed a bunch of musicians and engineers and artists and CEOs and all these people, and then kind of gave an overview about his findings about how people enter what he describes as a flow state, which I think the way we use it today is a little bit more broad than what he talked about, especially in the flow community, right? And so the thing that he describes, and this is kind of where I, when you say flow, what my mind goes to, and in his TED Talk, he says it best, I think. He says that when you're operating in a place where you have a very high skill level and you're working at a relatively high challenge level, that's where you can enter the state of flow. If you're at a low skill level and a low challenge level, then you're in boredom, right? If you're at like low skill level to high skill level and you're in an extreme challenge level, then that's like all anxiety, right? And so there's kind of this like sweet spot where it's a high challenge level or reasonable challenge level in something that you're skilled at. So yeah, I'm like really good at doing stuff for years on end every single day. And so that's what feels like the conduit to entering flow for me, is just like learning how to pay attention. I can enter it in math. I can enter it in movement. I can enter it in conversation, and it's like, it's so easy to not be in flow, and just having a little bit of awareness about like, how is it that you can tune your system into getting into that state more often helps you practice it. And then it helps you do it more. And then it's a great state to be in. And then it keeps rolling, just is self-reinforcing. And
Outstanding. Yeah. And actually for anyone who watched the game design stream over the past 2 weeks, you may have seen me draw the flow graph. And that's exactly the same research that Adam is referring to here. Is very much present in game design, balancing the ability to difficulty ratio and keeping people in the flow zone. So super cool. Awesome. So let's talk about this retreat. So you went out to a Vipassana center in California, correct? What was your day-to-day life like over these 10 days?
You get up at 4:30 in the morning, then you meditate. Actually, you get up at 4 in the morning because meditation starts at 4:30. Then at 6:30, you have breakfast, 8 meditation, 1 p.m. or 12 p.m. breakfast or lunch, meditation, 5 p.m. snack, 6 p.m. meditation, and then discourse, where the Goenka, the Burmese guy who spreads this particular version of Vipassana gives, well, they have a video of a talk that he gave about whatever lesson you're kind of at in the weekly sequence, and then meditation, and then go to bed by 10 p.m. and then up at 4 a.m. Every single day for 10 days. It really helps you to appreciate sleep. It's kind of like, I'd say the overall theme, that if I could just say it in one sentence, is just like, I don't know if I'm going to say it in one sentence, is, all right, you've done a bunch of stuff. Now go sit there and think about it. And
across your whole life, you've done a bunch of stuff over this life. Now go over there and think about it.
Yeah. And the thing is you're not even instructed to think about anything. You're instructed to sit there and breathe, and not even to do pranayama or anything. It's not like a particular type of breath. The instruction is just fall into a natural breath and pay attention to how the sensation is across your nose. And you do that for 3 days straight. So that's 30 hours of just in and out, in and out, in and out. And then eventually you move into the full body awareness. It's really profound once you get to that part. I had a really, really deep experience as I moved into it. And some people said, like, so over the 10 days, you have like kind of like different things happening each day. And some people kind of said they had like little spikes here and there, like day 4 was really intense or day 9 was really intense. I was just like up, 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 up. Like by day 9, I was like, I should have signed up for the 20-day course. I am not going to be done. This is I'm just like all revved up, all focused. I'm
So,
like totally in the stream.
so,
Yeah.
so you said for the first 3 days, you're just anchoring on the sensation of the breath at the bridge of the nose, and then for the next period of it, you're kind of doing body scans at that point. Like, to what degree is this guided? Are you listening to a tape? Is somebody's taking you through this? Do they just give you a prompt at the beginning and say go for 10 hours? Like, how does it work? How's it look? How's it work?
Yeah, so I'll preempt any experiential statements by saying these are my experiences, right?
Yes.
And it would
Good.
be really wonderful if you could hear them and also not get attached to them as if they might
Sure.
be your experiences, right? For everybody listening, it's easy
There's
to think
the disclaimer. Yeah.
the disclaimer, yeah, this may not be consistent with your own experience. Um, so I Okay, so how much guidance? So, okay, at first you're just sitting there meditating, and I kind of have like two streams going on in my brain. One is playing music in the background. The other one is whatever's distracting me from paying attention to my body right now, right? Like, and the distracting me from paying attention to my body stream kind of like jumps back and forth with the actually paying attention to my body stream, right? So it's like, so those are the couple of things that I'm dealing with. On day 2, they started playing chants in the morning meditation, kind of like half an hour before the thing ended, and they're all in Hindi, sung by Goenka, and don't understand Hindi, but the some of the Indian other meditators that I talked to afterwards said, if you could understand what he was saying, you would understand that he is saying really beautiful statements that are like super heartful. That the chanting is really powerful, and I felt that the chanting helped to sideline my audio or my music stream, you know. And so it was like it didn't even matter that I couldn't understand it. It was that I believed that it was consistent with the message that I was working on in every moment, you know. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
So I haven't. The most I've ever done is I've done a 3-day silent retreat at a Satchidananda Ashram Yogaville, which is where I did my teacher training. And yeah,
Uh-huh.
they often have the chants playing in the background and stuff. And man, they are just designed to be earworms, and they just stick around even after you leave for a little while. They're just kind of rolling in there. And yes, of course, they're all designed very much to facilitate that type of experience. So I think it's powerful in that way. Um, so I know, like, when I do the silent retreats at Yogaville, and I haven't actually had the joy of being a participant for quite some time. I'm usually a facilitator now, where I'm helping other people go through it, but I get to benefit from still being in that environment where you've got 100 people who aren't talking, and all this kind of stuff. And man, I will say that when my chatter from the day to day finally begins to subside, it creates room for the tough stuff to float to the surface. And it can be a pretty raw experience. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you end up sort of digesting kind of when the day to day tones down. You described your experience as sort of an up, 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 up. Like, were those moments of like challenge? Were there moments of challenge that you felt you transcended? Did you not have moments of challenge? Like, what would happen in these long silences for you?
Um, yeah. So at first, lots of distraction, lots of brain
Mhm.
going off in another way. Actually, at first, I would even say it was like fireworks. My brain was just like, oh, but there's this, but there's that, but there's that, but and I was just like, yo, dude, come, like we're breathing. Come on, just bring it back. And I'd get like one breath in. There. Okay, okay, wait, we're meditating. Okay, one breath
I think a lot of
in.
people on the stream can empathize with this experience,
Yeah.
probably when practicing that out.
A
Oh
lot of
my God.
ADHD people in here.
Sure. And I don't even think I'm ADHD. I think I'm pretty not ADHD, and I'm still like, so I can't even imagine if that is something that's in your life, how distracting it must be all
You
the
know what I
time.
have to do
Oh,
to meditate sometimes? I have to lay down in bed, put in earplugs, put a pillow over my head just to block out enough sensory stuff, like black out, just to be able to focus on my breathing and actually not let my mind wander.
wow. Yeah. Well, it sounds
So in
like you
these
found something.
Yeah, yeah. And so you said fireworks are going off. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's where we are. Okay, please continue.
Okay. So yeah, that was maybe within 3 days or so, the fireworks kind of started calming down. And I could get in, 4 breaths or something like that before I had a super distracting experience. And then, yeah, I moved into some pretty real um, experiences that, okay, so I think it's day 4 or something. They and this isn't true for all Vipassana retreats, that there are other modalities other than like the Goenka line. But in this one, it was like on day 4 or something, they were like, okay, we're going to start sitting with strong determination, meaning there are independent meditation sessions, and then there are 3 1-hour group meditation sessions. And for each of those hours, they want you to sit there and keep your eyes closed and keep your butt on your mat and not open your mouth and not open your arms. And you're just going to actually sit there for an entire hour. And in some people I've heard comment and say, oh, well, it's really uncomfortable. My back starts hurting, this and that. And that's true. My back starts hurting. My legs start falling asleep, like going through this discomfort. And that ended up being a really powerful layer of the following experiences, where then I was paying attention to like what was distracting me. Like when I'm sitting there trying to focus on my breath or focus on my elbow or whatever, like what is it that's causing me to come off track? And in a lot of cases, it was very meaningful things that are challenges to my moral or ethical structures, or things that have really bothered me. And so I just kind of like, as a single example that I haven't shared, and that would, I think, be really meaningful to share, is I was noticing my mind turning towards somebody in my life who um, who really causes a lot of pain and really causes a lot of suffering, but is like in my life. There's just no way. Like this person is just in my life, and I'm angry about it. I'm frustrated. I like don't know how to deal with it. I'm moving away from them as much as possible, and there's no option to actually move far enough away. And the more that I ponder it, the more I'm just like, no, that person does no good for anyone. And I don't know how to like make a change for them. It's like they need to make their own change. And I'm sitting there, my back is hurting, my legs are falling asleep, and I know them very well, and I know their family, and I know their history, and I really know them, and I'm just pondering on them and just being like, yeah, my back hurts, but like their whole life hurts. Like, yeah, my legs are asleep, but like they have been forced into sleep by the way that their parents interacted with them. Like, and their pain is so much deeper than my back hurting right now. And that is so true for so many people. Their pain is way worse than you sitting there with your back hurting for an hour while you're trying to meditate.
Yeah.
And I just moved into the place where I was like, you know what? It's not helpful for me to be angry. It's not helpful for me to push them away. It's not helpful for me to speak poorly about them. And as I went through that process, it was a really meaningful and deep transition. And I kind of like reached the end of the process before the end of the session. And it was really wonderful to like get through something and then still have time to sit there and be like, okay, what does it feel like to be on this side of getting through it? And so, although I'm kind of like experimenting now with, do I set a timer when I'm meditating, or do I just go until I'm done, or whatever? And I think that although timing seems like a artificial external constraint, um, if you end up having an experience like that where you do have a transformation during the process, and then you can kind of sit there after it and be like, well, okay, I have another 5 minutes. I'm just going to like be in this state. And it's actually that state is the one that you might be aiming for, right? Like you want to do as much programming of your brain as soon as you get to that state, because that's the new habit
Mm.
structure that you're wanting
Mhm.
to reinforce, you know? And so
Yeah,
it's
what a
really,
shame. What a shame would it be if like you transcended that thing and then just immediately got sucked back into old patterns without taking a moment to like let that solidify it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that was a pretty profound process for me. And I haven't had it challenged with any developing relationships yet, but
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see how generalizable that knowledge is.
For sure, for sure. We all need a meditation tune up from time to time too. So the
Yeah.
world has a way of pulling us back. So yeah, I guess with some of the time remaining, because I do want to allow for people to ask questions. You shared on Facebook what prompted me to reach out to you was that you shared this beautiful statement about basically personal accountability and how something about this retreat for you. I just wanted you to, I mean, first off, I have no idea. Maybe you've grown since the statement, put whatever preamble you went on it. But there was something that you wrote about sort of feeling 100% responsible for your own reactions and own emotions. And it's something that we do talk about a lot in this community. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that lesson.
Yeah, yeah, and also, disclaimer, I'm sure that there are things that happen to people that they're not responsible for, you know. Um, but in addition, the um, the aftermath is what I'm talking
Mhm.
about, right?
Your
And
response, not the events, but your response.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's really important to get some differentiation between those,
Mhm.
because yeah, there are some pretty terrible things that people do in the world, and I don't want to minimize that real hurt can happen,
Mhm.
and that I'm yeah. And so uh, yeah, I had a lot of experiences as I was describing with like, okay, this person really causes problems. I can't even think of like 5 things positive that have happened. You know, it's always a challenge. It's always ego. It's always dominance. It's always control. You know, it's like these are the recurring themes. And and I was sitting there and I was like, okay, how much of that is my responsibility? You know, how much of me being angry is is me appropriately responding to what okay, I did it, what somebody is doing, you know, and what amount of it is mine. And and I realized that in this case, I am 100% responsible for being angry, and that there was no time at which me being angry was going to help that particular situation. There are times when being angry might help.
Mhm.
And as I have continued to develop since that time, and wondering like, you know, is anger ever helpful? It seems anger is like very rarely helpful. Sometimes helpful if you're actually using it for communication and you actually believe the other person will hear you. Anger for strictly for the sake of being angry or strictly for yelling is not helpful. And as I've continued processing other events in my life, I'm just like, man, I really can't think of any scenarios where something happened and the type of response that I had was actually dependent upon what happened. And
Mm.
I've been spending a lot of time understanding habits and behaviors prior to this, and very deeply since then, because that's really the core of this type of work, is just like, what are your habits? And you mentioned it in reference to depression, is that like those are habits that develop in your mental structures, right? And you just kind of keep reinforcing them. And
Mhm.
so, you know, you could just be like, okay, well, maybe the core of this is, how do you reprogram your habits, right? And we're on autopilot so much, like we do so little decision making, even though we may perceive decisions as having been made. um, and it's really clear that mindfulness and Vipassana for me have been conduits to allow me to interrupt the um, cause response sequence long enough that I can take a look at what's happening in between them. that it's like if we try to over uh, metamorphosize, use metaphor too intensely to say there's a cause and an effect, right? Cause being somebody causes, somebody's angry, and then effect is somebody else being hurt, right? It's not actually quite like a ball hitting another ball on a table. There is the somebody being angry, and then there's like your whole mental structure in between actually getting hurt about it.
Yeah.
And when you can extend that out, and that's like what I'm finding the meditation really helps with, is having the pause moment, looking at the real scenario, saying, is there a line between where my emotions responded to it and what actually happened? If there is a line, admit to the line and route it backwards and realize that the line is actually inside of me. The line is actually not in the person who's doing whatever the action is that's causing me hurt or anger or whatever. And sometimes you can reroute it. And really the important thing that I'm finding is that like the shortest amount of time that you can spend in the state of response is shortest amount of time that you're in that state allows for the quickest reprogramming of the habit structure. So it's like if the response comes up and you catch it within 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, like a good example. I received a letter from a car rental company saying, you didn't return our car with 4 gallons of gas. Therefore, we're charging you $15 per gallon in order to refill the tank. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? I totally filled up that tank. I'm great at renting cars. I always fill them up before I return. And I started like going down this route of frustration. And I was like, wait, is it in any way useful for me to actually be frustrated about this at this level? No. And I only wasted about 15 minutes of my life being angry about that. And the question is like, are you going to literally spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 days being angry about something like that? Or am I going to just pay them the $60 and get all of those hours back? Right. So that was kind of what I thought about is like, okay, I'm paying $60 to not be angry for the next 2 hours as I try to work this out.
Yeah. And so
Okay,
I think, yeah, we talk about this a lot. We talk about that we can't change stress. Life will always be stressful, but we can change our relationship to stress. And so, by creating that pause called the golden pause, right, between stimulus and response, it is not to say that this person who you have the strained relationship doesn't do things that hurt you. It's not to say that the rental car company wasn't being ridiculous. Those things can be true. It doesn't make them not true. But there's that pause where, and KMR wrote in the chat here, sometimes anger can be useful. And in Satchidananda at Yogaville talked about keeping anger in your back pocket. And what he meant by that was, if you have that stimulus and your response is anger, but instead of being driven by that anger, you have that moment, you have that pause, and you think to yourself, can anger actually be useful here? Well, if it can, then you can use it towards your intention. You can use it to be effective. But what you're describing about is this: we do that, we get triggered, and then we spiral and we sit and we stew in this negative emotion. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help people. It doesn't help the situation. It really doesn't serve a purpose at all. And having the wisdom to be able to recognize that and let it go, it's like, how much of your life did you just get back? How much toll on your body did you save yourself by not having all of that course through you and just sit there and stew for so long? And yeah, we use the word triggered in our culture a lot, and that's not to say that triggers aren't real, but it's also not to, I guess, remove from ourselves our own responsibility to manage how we are triggered. When a trigger does happen, we do have a moment. We have a moment to pause, or we can train a moment to pause at least, and claim a bit more control and a bit more responsibility over our reaction.
Yeah, it's interesting. It bringing it back to like the body experience. It makes me think about some of my friends who have described having really drastic experience as with power tools, interacting with their bodies in undesirable ways. and that you can like have a really intense thing happen to you. And all of them described like having the thing, like having the nail go through their finger or whatever, and then looking at it, and you have that moment. You know, you have a moment when like the pain happens to say, "Oh crap, I need to change something." You know, and it's been causing me to wonder, like, do you have that when you're in a stressful trigger situation like you're describing, or is it that the trigger happens before you're aware of the pain possibly coming on? And you know,
Mhm,
you're so much more experienced than me that like this is a question that I'm asking you now,
mhm.
is that it's like, you know, um, can you remain vigilant when you're around people who you think are going to be triggering you? Is that too much work to try to remain vigilant, or is that, one of the layers of stress for a lot of people? Like, do we have that thing like the physical experience where it's like, oh, it happened, and you can actually like see it before it hits you, or
I
not?
think I think that it's honestly, I think it's probably because on the one hand, if you think about like really traumatic type things like taking a nail gun through the hand or something like that, I feel like that is going to shoot shock so much through the roof that it's like I feel like that's like almost on the other side of it. It's like you've like
Mm,
bypassed like the normal reactions and like you actually have that pause because it's
mhm,
so intense. But I think yeah, your garden variety trigger type situations, I think what we all just need to have to manage for ourselves is that uh, it is true that by practicing this stuff we can develop that pause, but it still does require resource. Managing a response still does require a resource. And so, I have people in my life that you know, triggered me regularly, kind of a traumatic relationship. And I kept trying to, one thing I do, Adam, is I do Muay Thai kickboxing. And
nice.
recently have learned like just because you can take a punch in the face doesn't mean you always should take a punch in the face. Like, you know, sometimes maybe you could be a little fight a little smarter. And so like I've had to apply that with like this relationship where this person, anytime I would see their icon pop up on social media, I would get that low key trigger. And it's not that I couldn't manage it, but it was taking resource every time that it did. And as much as I didn't want to necessarily cut this person off or block this person from my life, I did eventually just have to make the decision for my own health that I was like, this, like you said, that low grade vigilance that starts to develop of anytime I open my computer and maybe open Facebook or something, I don't know if I'm going to see that person's face and it's going to make me feel away. And I just decided for my own sanity, I was like, you know what? I have to block this person. It doesn't mean I don't love them. It doesn't mean I don't forgive them. But it just means that for me, I just have to do a bit of resource management. And I think that's also going to depend on just, we talk about in sort of trauma informedness and stuff like that. We talk about halt, like don't do anything when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Like those four tend to put you in like
Mm,
a state where you're maybe not going to make the best decisions. And so,
mhm,
so you got to think about yourself of like, it's not just when you're vigilant on your good days. It's like maybe putting some protection around yourself for your bad days too. It's like, okay, maybe I can see that person on social media when I'm well fed and I've slept well and I've had a recent good social exchange. But when I'm in that halt period, I see that person and now suddenly I'm struggling. So, all of this is a practice. We're practicing here, and it's just good for people to, examine and be honest about themselves of where they are. We at the end of the day, we are responsible for our own reactions, but we're also responsible for knowing like, um, that extra plate on the dumbbell is too much. Like, and if I try and push it, it's gonna crush me. Like you gotta have awareness of that as well.
yeah, I am thinking about how you were describing, like, how do you have, or about having the, would you say, extra resource, right?
Yeah,
So that you're able. And then you said hungry,
hungry,
angry,
hungry,
lone,
angry, lonely, and tired. Halt.
hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Halt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I mentioned like what drove me to doing the Vipassana retreat was like a pretty intense year in life experience. And I like did not sleep well most of this year, like
Mhm.
possibly less than 2 hours of sleep a night for months
Mhm.
on end.
Wow.
And I And so, you know, he needed something extreme to get you to show up for it. And then I went and did it. And there's kind of this like actual knowledge um, in behavioral economics and behavioral change that that like when you're trying to develop a new habit, it's actually can be super functional to like to do an intervention, right? To do it like super deeply for a long time. And then when you return to your normal life, it's going to be easier to maintain than it is to like get started. And so in that way, I would like, I would strongly suggest that, that if you're wanting a meditation practice or you're wanting extra resources around being hungry or angry or lonely or tired, right? Then doing something like one of these 10-day meditation retreats gets the habit going. After the first day, I slept an entire night for the first time in several months, and this I wasn't expecting to be told when I go home, okay, now you're expected to meditate for an hour every morning and every night. But I was like, oh, okay, you know, I might try it. And then I left it and I was like, well, it's the day after. What am I going to do? And I was like, I'll sit and meditate for a little while. you know, then it kind of just like kept on going. And now I don't meditate for an entire hour every morning and every night, but I do meditate every single morning and every single night. And it does help with my tiredness and it does help with my anger. And I personally don't have loneliness issues, so that, like that's not. I can't speak a lot to that. In hunger, you just gotta actually eat, right? But yeah, I would say that like at least two of those things can clearly be solved by a solid meditative practice, and doing a dedicated intervention for a while can be a really strong way to get yourself going on that. And yeah, I mean, for years I've been aware of meditation and I've done it on and off, but it's never really stuck and I've never really been dedicated. And now it's so clear, so clear. I can't even, I already thought that I had like a laser beam of a mind, and the upgrade that has resulted from this is monumental. And so I just,
Outstanding.
yeah, wanted to
Wow.
say that.
I want to share. I want to share one comment from somebody in the chat here, and then do you have time? If we go to 5:15 to do like one question, if anyone's got one.
I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, great.
Chat with
Okay,
some people. Yeah.
So Queen Vane writes, I'd be interested in training myself to have that pause moment. I think after a while it would get easier. I could see myself being less sad and angry all the time if I did have that moment where I feel the emotion, pause and think. People always say, think before you speak or act. And well, I do think before I act a lot, but not all the time. I had the same problem. I have a friend where if they text me, I just can't. I would be mad or whatever, even though I'm every bit responsible for what happened. I still have this. I don't know. I don't feel that all the time anymore, but I don't go reaching out to them much. That's good just to recognize your level of resource with that relationship, and developing a practice can help. So I'd like to, so anyone in the chat, if you want to ask a question of the space juggler, and while those come in, we didn't get to talk with you as much about space juggling. I'm going to brag on you briefly, and then I'm going to ask you just a easy softball science question. But I just want to let people know, like, what Adam's doing is literally making new math. Like, we're making new math. We're making math of how bodies move in physical spaces in 0G that we did not know before. And so Adam's research is getting a lot of attention, which is really exciting. But I wanted to ask you, there's been some pretty big space events recently. We've had the new telescope go online. We just smacked an asteroid, apparently. We just smacked it. I don't know, what's been sort of one of the coolest sort of things that has been on your radar just in the world of space recently? Is there an image you've seen in the news telescope that's blown your mind or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Webb telescope is stunning, right? Everything that comes out of that, and just seeing the what is it?
Pretty awesome.
The creation, the clouds of
Pillars
creation.
of creation.
Yeah, the
that was
column.
incredible.
Say it again.
Oh, I don't know the name. I don't.
I think it's called the Pillars of Creation. Yes. Somebody wants to grab that image and drop it in the chat. It's not messing around.
So good. Yeah. And so yeah, the space telescope stuff is really good.
Yeah, this is it right here.
I am super excited about how many countries around the world are really doing meaningful research and space exploration right now. Um, right now, the United States, Russia, and China all have human flight capabilities, and that is just like really, really cool. I do deeply believe in space being the great democratizer of our planet and of our relationships, and the fact that like the International Space Station is presently still active with Russian and American um,
Right. I always
professional
thought that was
space
pretty
flight.
cool.
Yeah, it's
Through the
really
whole war in Ukraine and everything, just the one thing that kept going was the space station,
yeah,
There's no borders in space.
yeah. There's actually no borders on Earth.
That's
And
true,
you have
yeah.
to go to space to see it. That's one of the things that the astronauts say is they go up there and they thought, they've seen pictures or whatever, but they actually weren't prepared for seeing an Earth that doesn't have lines on it, and it really helped to appreciate the wholeness of our planet. And so that's really what I'm excited about. And it's like right now, I think 5 countries have orbiters or landed on Mars, which is just fabulous. The one of the big jokes is, the Apollo 13 movie came out a number of years ago. They spent like $125 million making it or something like that. And one of the good jokes is that India put a satellite around Mars for less money than the United States spent on making a movie about going to the moon.
Wow.
And so
That's
it's just like,
exciting.
and the like small companies are just exploding. I was just at the International Astronautical Congress in Paris, and it was just like so many small companies that are like my buddy who he like got his PhD in Sydney, Australia, and was just kind of interested in magnetic stuff. And then he came up with an idea how to change a plasma engine so that you could get more energy out of it and make it more efficient. And so now he
Wow.
has a plasma rocket engine company. And it's like one of the
That's
very few
crazy.
manufacturing companies, space manufacturing companies in Australia. And it's just like, man, it basically, like, the way to think about it is it's 1994 and it's the internet, and like it's 2022 and it's space. Like that
Wow.
is actually the cusp that we were at. It's a really exciting time.
That's incredible. Well,
Technology has
on that
advanced
note,
incredibly far.
yeah. And on that note, thank you so much, the space juggler, Dr. Adam Diper. Thanks so much for stopping by and talking to us. It was a real delight learning about your experience. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
you guys can also check out his Instagram. I'm gonna post it here in the chat. Follow him on there if you want. Is there anything else people should go check out if they wanted to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, I have some longer form videos on YouTube, and those are also the Space Juggler, same handle as the
Okay, cool.
Instagram and Facebook and
I'll
everything.
drop a link for that.
Okay, yeah, it's just youtube.com/the Space Juggler, and yeah, and then what would I say is the biggest resource I would suggest is like the things that are happening in your own life are probably like the coolest things that could be going on in the world. So, you might be curious about space juggling, but I hope that if you choose to check out this project and look at it, that the result of checking it out would be for you to go back to your own projects and kind of like think about them and be like, okay, what like how deep can this go? Like space juggling is totally ridiculous, and I spent an insane amount of time on it and got like a really huge payoff. And I really think that a lot of people have a lot of cool projects, and if you could investigate your own projects with that level of curiosity, that'd be cool for your life, and it'd be cool for everybody else on the planet.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. And for those of you who are watching earlier, we did make the block move and jump in the game engine. It was a one character change that was needed. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. This was amazing. Everyone, please check out Adam. Please check out the Space Juggler, and then turn that enthusiastic eye inward and work on your own projects. The world is just looking forward to see what y'all got. So
That is incredible. Look at that.
all right. Well, bye, Adam. Thank you again.
Thank you all so much for having me. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and week.
All right.
You
Bye-bye.
too, man. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you next time on the Maru Fam.
Bye.
Space out.
All right. We done streaming?
We are done streaming.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Adam, thanks a lot, man.